What does HooLiv do?
We are in the student accommodation space. Over the last couple of decades, the number of students that are enrolling for higher education has gone up, the universities have gone up, the number of coaching institutes have gone up, and so on. But the infrastructure hasn't really kept pace with it.
By the way, how many cities are you in?
We are in 7, managing close to 47 assets now,
Wow.
nearly 5,000 student housing beds,
Okay.
some 15 to 16 institute collaborations.
Oh wow, so you don't even have to worry about finding one by one student. So you would be profitable from day zero.
By March 2021, I think we had expanded significantly. And then the COVID second wave happened. That was the tough period for us.
Yeah.
Where profitability was out of question. It was just how do we keep our heads above water.
Now you're probably going to go to 450
Yeah,
properties.
yeah.
What has been your biggest bottleneck? Hi guys, I'm Raj. Thanks for joining another episode of Zero to Momentum. I'm here with Chinmoy, co-founder of HooLiv today. Chinmoy, thanks for doing this.
Hey Raj, always a pleasure to meet you, man.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Chinmoy, what does HooLiv do?
So it's part of HooLiv, we are in the student accommodation space.
Okay.
So essentially what has happened is over the last couple of decades, the number of students that are enrolling for higher education has gone up, the universities have gone up, the number of coaching institutes have gone up, and so on. But the infrastructure hasn't really kept pace with it. And so some of the challenges that we faced when I was a student, maybe going 20, 25 years back, in terms of unhygienic places, unsafe places, inconvenient, and so on, we realized that a lot of those problems are still persisting because the asset owners never really had a period of time where they had to struggle to drive occupancy. Because of all these factors, they never had to face that struggle.
There's a lot of demand.
Exactly. So there was never a inclination towards upgrading the assets or of their upkeep and so on.
Awesome.
So that's the space that we're operating in. There's a huge lack of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we are trying to become the infrastructure partner to these institutions and helping them provide accommodation to the students. So that's in a nutshell what HooLiv is.
Basically, you give great housing to students.
Absolutely.
All across India.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's easy to understand and super awesome. How did you get started in it? Like, were you in real estate or student housing, or like, why did you pick this?
No, I think it's kind of serendipitous, you could say, and it is also linked with what we were doing prior to starting HooLiv. So, as you know, the 4 founders, this is our second entrepreneurial venture. The first one, incidentally, when we were working on the first one, which got acquired in 2018 and so on, we came across an opportunity which was more towards senior housing in the Southeast Asian market. So when that opportunity came via that venture, we were looking at that market and exploring it and so on. And that kind of struck a chord with us. So in 2019, when we came out and we were thinking what to start next and so on, that is something that always remained with us. And we said, why don't we explore this market in terms of the senior care or the senior accommodation? And that's how we got into the entire real estate, hospitality, and accommodation space. While researching that market, we felt that maybe India as a market for senior care was slightly behind the Southeast or the European markets and so on. So we parked that. But since we were already in that journey of exploring that space, student housing is how we kind of stumbled upon it, you could say. We said, hey, this looks pretty interesting. It's a very blue ocean. It's very unorganized. And maybe we have a potential to do to this industry what say Oyo did to the hotel industry.
Sure.
Bring them all under an organized umbrella and so on. So that's how we got initiated towards student housing.
If we go back to day zero, what was your first property? How did you get your first property? How did you pay for that deposit?
Sure. Rather first couple of assets, in fact, we opened up nearly at the same time. That was right after the COVID first wave, towards October, November of 2020, if I remember correctly. And the one was in Pune and another was in Meerut. So those were our first 2 assets. And luckily, because of our past exit and all that, we could raise a pre-seed right when we were starting from a group called the Cult Capital and so on.
Sure.
So we were on that cash when the entire COVID wave stuck. So post-COVID wave, we had the capital available to start growing. And those are the 2 assets that we took up. And the Pune one, because one of my co-founders, also my elder sister, Dr. Rashmi, she is based in Pune. And so she took up one there, and my other partner Abhishek, he took up one in Meerut.
Yeah.
So those were the two, I think the first two we launched almost precisely at the same time. Similar.
So when you say you took on a building or an asset, what does that entail? Like, did you have to renovate it? You are obviously managing that student experience. What did that look like?
I think it was, if I look back, Raj, obviously the entire model has evolved as we gain more operating experience and so on. But I think when we started, the fundamentals were very clear that, if I explain in very plain language, if you take up a building and turn it upside down, everything that falls belongs to us. Everything that doesn't fall belongs to the asset owner. I think that's the place where we started from.
Okay.
That look, anything structurally, anything that do with anything, the structure modifications, you do it. All the white goods, amenities we bring in.
Sure.
I think that's the point we started, Raj. And gradually, obviously, we evolved. And then as the negotiations became more nuanced, you pass on something to the asset owner passes something to you. So those kind of evolve and become more of a case-to-case basis. But our initial stand was that we bring in the white goods, you give us the asset, we get in for a long-term contract, we pay you a monthly assured rental. So you are out of the picture. We manage and operate the asset.
Okay.
Any upside that we generate then belongs to us.
Sure. Okay. So talking about that upside, what is it? Like you rent this for $100 and you the student pays X?
Yes, typically, so Raj, what happens, the markets that we are operating in, specifically the non-metros, the tier 2, tier 3. So we are present in places where there's no unorganized competitors.
Okay.
And we usually find ourselves being 10 to 15% higher than the rest of the market, obviously because of the quality and the standard of services and so on. So we are able to pass a certain delta higher to the asset owner as well, because we're able to command a higher price. So for the asset owner, it takes up the entire operational hassles from their hand. They don't have to worry about the day-to-day grievances, the issue resolutions, and so on, and yet get a assured monthly rental. So that's a win for them. And for us, obviously, we are definitely slightly higher than what we charge. So the way we started, Raj, was predominantly a B2C model, where we used to take up these assets which are in close proximity to, say, institutes, coaching centers. Once we have taken up an asset, then we try to drive occupancy. Okay. But I think that model has evolved completely now, where I would be, comfortable saying that 90% of our occupancy is currently now B2B.
Okay.
Where we first collaborate with an institute, and based on their demand, then we take up assets or multiple assets to house their students.
Oh, wow. So you don't even have to worry about finding one by one student. That's what it means.
Exactly.
You have an institute saying, I have 1,000 students. Can you?
Absolutely. So a lot of our beds, 85-90% of our beds are now currently underwritten by these institutes.
Okay.
So we don't have to worry about driving occupancy. We don't have to worry so much about churn. And obviously, all models come with the flaws and the good parts.
Okay.
But these are the certain good parts of the B2B relationship, that you are assured of the occupancy, at least for a period of time.
Now, so that makes sense. The model makes sense. How do you manage these places day to day? I know you started off, again, if we just go back, you had 2 locations in 2 different cities already. Yeah. I know it was 4 of you. And now, by the way, how many cities are you in?
We are in 7.
You're in 7 cities?
The 8th one,
7, 8 cities, and you have how many properties across?
We, Raj, managing close to 47 assets now, nearly 5,000 student housing beds. Okay. So 15 to 16 institute collaborations.
Correct. So on a per building basis, how many people do you have? What does management look like?
Yeah. So we have kind of operating it for the last 4 or 5 years, Raj. We have our own blueprint, or you could say thumb rules around certain things. For instance, for every asset, there would be a warden. That's non-negotiable. So there is a warden at the asset who stays on the asset. So that's number one. Secondly, I think the rule that my team follows is that for every 40 students, we have 1 housekeeping staff. So that's who is involved in the daily housekeeping and all this. So every 40 beds, we have 1. So depending on the size of the asset, obviously you deploy that. And then you have the kitchen staff. But here again, slight difference that we have now made, Raj, is that earlier we used to take up assets which were in kind of disparate locations. One could be here in one part of the city, other could be in somewhere else. What we realized was that at the end of the day, I'm building redundancies in every place, because I have to house exactly the same staff everywhere. The best way to build an economies of scale in this business is by growing in a cluster, where I have one mothership, which is kind of driving the entire thing around. For instance, if I take the case of Noida, we have close to now 2,000 beds and 5 facilities, all within 0.5 kilometer radius. And one of my largest properties is a 700-bed facility. So everything gets now driven from that 700-bed facility. So I have a centralized kitchen, which kind of works almost like a captive cloud kitchen, right? It provides food to the rest of the properties. Same with the housekeeping staff. Now, I don't have to now follow rigorously that 1:40 kind of relationship, because our students have now the ability to book their housekeeping slots through their HooLiv app.
Yeah.
So every morning, we exactly know how many requests have come in, apart from the common area keeping, which is done every day. How many other requests have come in? So then I can build efficiency into my housekeeping staff as well.
Fine.
You know, so then what happens, Raj, is that for every new property that I'm adding in a cluster, my cost of acquiring and cost of running is lower than the N-1. You know, so that's how we are trying to build that economies of scale.
HooLiv app you just mentioned.
Right.
What all does the app do?
Yeah. So I think that's also been a pretty interesting journey for us, Raj. Since we were coming on the back of a tech exit, and tech is something that's in our DNA. You know, we can't get away from that. So instantly, when we got into this real estate hospitality space, a lot of people advised us that, you know, tech in this kind of setup is mainly an enabler. You know, it's good to have, fine not to have, and so on. But I'm so glad that we actually didn't pay heed to those advices. So we realized that if we are targeting an 18 to 24, 25 age group, for whom the most expensive real estate is their phone. Yeah. So we have to make technology as a driver of the business. It cannot be just an enabler. So right from day one, we invested heavily in building a complete property management solution. And that has two facets. One is on the student side of things, and the other one is on the operations side. Now, the reason why we decided to work on the whole entire operational piece of it as well, you know, this is an industry, Raj, where it is, end of the day, it is people driven. It's a services industry, it's people driven. And the moment you have people, you have opportunity for leakages to happen. So the idea is that how much intuitive can we make the tech so that a lot of these opportunities for leakages are, you know, we get over that. And we did. As we progressed, we realized a lot of places where people can take us for a ride, even our own, you know, staff in some disparate locations, how they can game the system. So every time we learned, we try to go back and incorporate it. So right from geotagging, geofencing to vendor management, payroll management, leave management, everything is built in-house in our operations part.
Yeah.
The same way, we realized, Raj, that on the tenant side of things, because the students are mostly comfortable doing everything on a smartphone, so we have to be there. So we started with providing them the basic things, like, for example, the payment through the app, or raising service requests, or booking their, the cafeterias, for example, if they want to order something, and so on. Now it has evolved to something much more, where we're able to push a lot of auxiliary or value-added services to them. For instance, we have partnered with a fintech company to provide the micro loan facilities.
Okay.
So it's someone's birthday. Hey, you don't have to go to your local guardian or a friend to borrow money. You can use your HooLiv app to borrow a small ticket, say 2,000 to 5,000 rupees loan, and be done with it. You know?
Yeah.
So something like that keeps on now adding and makes that HooLiv app
lucrative.
More. Yeah.
The first two properties you had, and I know you had pre-seed and you had those properties, were you instantly profitable on those two properties?
No, not really, Raj, because I think it was some of the macro factors also played a great role. Because what happened is we started right after the COVID first wave, right? So by March of 2021, we had expanded significantly. The good part that had happened during that phase was that this space had become a bit of an even playing field, because nobody could anticipate how severe COVID was going to be. So a lot of our peers, they struggled. Some of them shut shop and so on. So a lot of those assets were available to us.
Actually, can we double click on that? The people who shut shop, and that's why I brought up profitability, because if you look at the WeWork model, the big criticism usually from financial minds is that you are taking on long-term liabilities, which is this 3-year, 5-year leases, and you have short-term rent coming. People can leave every month. Now, in your case, I'm assuming at least the commitment is 1 whole year from the student?
It is 1 whole year. So there was definitely a mismatch there.
Okay.
Raj. There was definitely a mismatch there, and a lot of people struggled because of that.
Yeah, because they were burning a lot of money first and not making enough, obviously.
Through our B2B or the institutional way, that part is slightly taken care of, Raj, because the collaboration in the institute is for, say, for instance, a 7-year with a 3-year lock-in. And I have the exactly same arrangement with the asset owner as well.
Okay, so you would be profitable from day zero because
From day zero, it was primarily B2C. Right? Yeah. Now the current models or the B2B models,
Understood.
yes, that mismatch is no longer there.
Yeah.
And we have margins right from day one, but it wasn't when we started. So going back to that part, Raj. So by March 2021, I think we had expanded significantly, and then the COVID second wave happened. The second wave was still manageable in a way because there was a bit of camaraderie, bonhomie among everybody that we should support each other. So the asset owner, someone gave us a moratorium, someone reduced the rent, someone waived off. So we still negotiated that part. But I think what hit us hard, and in general the student housing industry, was actually the long tail of COVID. Once government lifted the lockdowns, that's when the asset owner started expecting the contractual, for us to honor the arrangement. But the institutes were either still running in an offline mode or in hybrid mode.
Yeah.
So the students were still not back on campus. Occupancy was very low, but the outflow was quite high. So I think for a period of year and a half post-COVID phase two, that was the tough period for us.
Yeah.
Where profitability was out of question. It was just how do we keep our heads above water?
Yeah.
That was the primary.
Yeah.
But I think slowly now, that showed about last year, 2 years, things have much improved, so on. So now any asset that we take, we have a very clear idea how much time will it take to be at the peak occupancy? What should our break-even occupancy be? So yeah, if we're one of the strong beliefs we have, Raj, at our end, is that our business is as strong as the weakest asset. Because that will always keep pulling the entire economics down.
Yeah.
So we try to ensure that every asset that we take out, it is profitable right from day one or day two of the second month.
Yeah. So talking about the weakest asset, of course, occupancy will define how much money you make there. But after you had your first two properties, was it easy to find properties that were good quality, or do you usually find you were saying at the beginning of our conversation that the infrastructure is lacking. In some cases, the infrastructure is dilapidated. So do you have to do a lot of work on these buildings, or how, as you add more and more, I'm sure you have a certain quality standard even for the building.
Right. No, that's a great point, Raj. So actually, there is this bit of a shift happening in that aspect as well. Now, if you look at this space, Raj, when you talk about pure asset light model, and you are taking up inventory which is already running as student housing, and then you are retrofitting it and running, sometimes you run into the fact that there's not a whole lot of changes you can do to a particular asset. Some asset may not allow you or give you the flexibility to carve out a fitness area or maybe a cafeteria. It's just structurally impossible to do that. In some cases, the building might be so aged that any amount of retrofitting is just putting a band-aid on it. So you cannot do much. So that's the compromise, Raj, that on one end, if you are extremely asset light and focusing only on that, yes, your scalability could be much high, but you're compromising on suitability. So what we have now slowly started doing, Raj, getting more operating experience, is that we're now trying to collaborate with developers and build what in our language we call as a purpose-built student accommodation, or PBSs, so that you are involved right from day one. You are telling the developer that these are exactly the kind of things I need. You're roping in your institution partner as well. So you're building it based on their recommendation. So then you're moving slightly towards that suitability, part of things, where it is built exactly to your need. But yes, initially when you talk about pure asset light and these kind of buildings, that's a challenge that you run into. And then as you evolve, you also start getting the pulse of a student, that what exactly students like, what commands a premium in a market. So as you rightly said, slowly you start building those benchmarks and say, this is the minimum I'm looking at a property, or this is how the approach road should be. This is how the lighting should be. It should be from within this much distance from an institute. So slowly your filtering criteria has become much more stronger. And the moment your criteria has become stronger, automatically the properties that qualify that will be in a much better shape than what we used to do earlier. So I think those models also are evolving, Raj.
So if somebody watching this wants to do this as a small business and run just one property, you yourself said that there are a lot of economies of scale and you're running 45 institutions trust you to give you demand, etc. So those benefits or your competitive advantage is very clear. But just for kicks, if somebody wanted to run one building, could they easily do it and make a margin, or this is meant to be something that is clustered and amalgamated at scale?
So both, Raj. So if someone wants to take up one asset and start running it, they can very easily do it. And maybe they can do it a much better way than we are, maybe for that particular asset. the nuance here, Raj, is that this business is very similar to a restaurant business where location matters.
Yeah.
So if you have an asset right across the street from an institute, you can have just one-off asset and be profitable throughout the year. It could be a great lifestyle business. But the moment you are slightly away from site, that's where the challenge comes. Because if you're a pure play B2C asset, a lot of these single operators, Raj, the challenge they run into is that either they do not have the competency or the bandwidth for any kind of institutional collaboration. And moment that happens, that is the handicap there. You're always behind the B2C model, where then you're running into churn, you're running into constant shifting of operators because somebody is not able to honor your rent payments on time. So there is a constant struggle, right? So location matters. And that is why if you see something like Kota, for instance, right? Now, Kota, you could just set up one room in your house and it occupied throughout the year. That again, because of the location. So location matters a lot, Raj. But otherwise, because it's our hard assets, there is only so much that you can do in a particular property.
Exactly.
In terms of hard assets or the amenities. It are all these things like providing them an app, providing them value-added services, industry visits, night kitchen, loan facilities. Those are the things that a mom and pop operator might find it very difficult to do, or a single asset owner might find very difficult.
And so these are the value-add services HooLiv is providing.
These are the comparative advantages as well.
Yeah. So, by the way, what's your, and throughout it could have been the same answer, what has been your biggest bottleneck in getting to these 45 properties, and now you're probably going to go to 450 properties? What has been your biggest bottleneck? Has it been capital? Has it been finding good assets? Has it been people on your team who will man those assets and get them ready?
I would say the last one, Raj. Because your expansion or how aggressive you are with the expansion is obviously related to the capital bandwidth. So the capital or the lack of it isn't really slowing, it is really halting you, but it may slow down your progress, but it isn't really halting you. I think the biggest challenge in this industry, Raj, is finding right people. Specifically at the bottom of the pyramid.
Sure.
When we are, and it is actually
wardens. You mean wardens when you say bottom?
Wardens, the housekeeping staff, the kitchen staff, and specifically because we are operating in a non-metro, where again it becomes slightly more difficult. We are on our own kitchen, right? So you have the chef today, tomorrow he just calls up and says, "I'm no longer working." It's very little that you can do in that kind of. It's a services industry. So you always run into those kind of problems. So we are trying our ways. We are trying to see if we can partner with institutes which actually provide this training and then they prepare people to join the workforce. So can we tie up with those institutes so that they have a constant supply of resources, right? The housekeeping, kitchen, and all that. So that is the biggest challenge. We opened up in Jammu, collaboration with IIT Jammu, and that's the biggest bottleneck we had. How do we send people to Jammu? So where do you send them from? And Raj, if you source it locally, you always run into the problem that the next day they have disappeared. Because their home is right there.
Amazing. This was a really fun chat, and thanks for doing this with us. Thanks a lot, Chinmoy.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Raj.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
I just wrapped up my chat with Chinmoy, founder of HooLiv, who has 5,000 student housing rooms across the country. The biggest insight that jumped out at me is if you think about the world of co-work and co-live, etc., there's always been a traditional problem of having all these fancy assets, but then having these short-term tenants that would leave you. I think Chinmoy has cracked that problem with the B2B partnerships, meaning having the demand figured out first and then the supply. And then as usual, the other big insight is you could figure out the model, figure out the experience, but the people on the street, the folks that actually provide that experience is always going to be a bottleneck. Thank you.